what a high sugar diet is actually doing to your body. What I'm about to tell you is vital in understanding how sugar affects our body and our brain and how it's really sneaky. We're not thinking we're getting extra sugar, but we are. And I'm going to explain this in this video. Stay until the very end because I'm going to give you a list of alternative names that the food industry uses to hide sugar within products. So let's start by defining sugar. Sugar is very simply a soluble sweet carbohydrate, a monosaccharide. Usually we see it in the form of glucose and fructose, but it comes in many other forms. And it doesn't matter where it is or how it starts, it's all a simple carbohydrate, and it can and will spike your blood sugar. Why is sugar so bad for us? People say to me, come on, Vin, we were eating this stuff back in the Paleolithic era. Seems like nowadays we like going back to the Paleolithic era to try to explain everything that's going wrong with our health today. And you would be correct. As a matter of fact, some people would say, well, bees were around back during the caveman days, therefore honey was around, therefore honey is good for us. Trust me, honey is just like any other sugar. There's nothing special about eating the stuff. So if we're going to go back to see where we started with our sugar consumption, it was usually within the plants and fruit that we ate, right? Polysaccharides come from all sorts of vegetables and fruit. So it was natural that we were getting some sugar. So it's not that sugar is awfully bad for the human body, it's the amount we're getting. Sometimes the poison is within the dose. And that's what's happening here today. So let's come out of the caveman era and let's get right to the Lincoln administration. The average person ate about a pound of sugar per year. That's far different from today. Now, I've seen several different studies. The lowest I've seen shows that the average person is now eating 250 pounds of sugar per person per year, and as high as 350 pounds, depending on which study you want to follow. At any rate, both of those numbers are way north of 1 pound. And that 1 pound in 1865 was considered a delicacy. And when you go back to the 1865 era, getting granulated sugar or eating those type of desserts is very expensive, so only wealthy people could afford it. And that's where we started seeing corpulence first. Peasants were still lean and mean because they frankly couldn't afford the white stuff. Although by the early 1900s, we started eating more sugar in North America. Around that time, I think it was 1910, 1912, explorer Wilmar Stephenson went to the Inuit people and got trapped for well over 6 months. So while studying these people, what he learned was they had no tooth decay. They had no heart disease. As a matter of fact, they had never heard of it. What they mostly ate was blubber and protein from whales, fish, and whatever they can actually spear in that area of the world. The one thing they had nothing of was any sort of vegetation, especially granular sugar. So the question becomes, if we went crazy over sugar by the early 1900s, why did we only start getting fat recently? Well, we didn't go that crazy at first. It was a nice slow ramp up through the early 1900s into the 1930s and 40s. Got to remember, we went through a Great Depression, we went through war, all of this stuff was happening around us. People weren't just sitting around in front of a television eating sugar, mostly because the television hadn't been invented yet. Consider this. Throughout most of the 1900s, we looked at sugar as being a treat, a dessert, if you will. People didn't walk around drinking 64-ounce soft drinks. We didn't have convenience stores hooked to gas stations. You went in, you got your gas, you left. As a matter of fact, about the only thing you could get at a gas station besides gas back in those days were cigarettes. Not that I'm telling you to start smoking to stop sugar, but I'm just using it for effect. There was nothing at a gas station to eat. I've used this example in my podcast and probably in other videos, but it's worth repeating here. When I was a kid, I drank approximately 84 ounces or less of Coca-Cola per year. How do I know this? Well, my dad would take us to Frank Danina's barbershop. And Frank had one of those Coke machines that would spew out the bottle, the glass bottle. And Coke used to make a 7-ounce bottle. I figured we got about 12 haircuts per year, so 7 times 12 is 84. Here's the thing. I never finished those Cokes. Once it wasn't ice cold anymore, I didn't drink anymore, so I probably actually had less than 84 ounces of Coke per year. Let's move that into today's world. You can walk into most convenience stores and get a 64-ounce Big Gulp style. As a matter of fact, cars now have cup holders that will hold the bigger cups. You see, we don't see it happening right in front of us, but it is. Cup holders used to be just big enough to hold a bottle or maybe a coffee cup. Go check your car now. Those cup holders are that big so that you can fit more and more sugar in your car so that you can have that injection of sugar going into your body at all times of the day. As a matter of fact, my friend Gary Taubes in his book, Why We Get Fat and What to Do About It, explains this. You could be a morbidly obese person, but if your brain is getting the wrong message from sugar, your brain will tell you that you're emaciated and starving and that you have to take in more calories to arrest the situation. And if the closest thing around is a Big Gulp, that's what you're going to go for. That's why you see so many people walking around explaining that they have low blood sugar and they have no energy. And the only way they could get that energy is by keeping a slow trickle of sugar going into their mouth, either through a soft drink, a fruit juice, or any kind of sugary treat. I always say ho-hos and ding-dongs because they're funny and it's the only two I can remember. And by the way, this is going to sound awful, but I've never actually had either one of those. So I don't know what they taste like, but I do know the names. Treats can come in all forms, and there's sugar everywhere. Every time I go to get gas, I will browse what people are eating because I like to know what's going on. Even if you buy beef jerky in one of these convenience stores, if you look on the back, there's a ton of sugar in it. In the 1980s, we had a war on drugs, and we were trying to get people to stop using drugs. And there was a very famous commercial. And in the commercial, you would just see a pair of hands, and the person would hold an egg up. And you would hear the announcer say, "This is your brain." And then they would take the egg and crack it into a steaming hot skillet, and the egg would start frying. And it would say, "This is your brain on drugs." Now, I'm not sure if that commercial got anyone to ever stop using drugs, but I'm going to do something similar to try to get you to stop using sugar. Okay, in order to explain what sugar is doing to your brain and to your body, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to wear my glasses because they make me look smarter, and I'm going to use a pen because if I use a pen, it makes me look like I know what I'm talking about. So when we eat sugar, our blood sugar spikes, and the way we get it back down is we release insulin. It's a hormone that pushes the sugar back down. It doesn't just do that. It actually drives some of that sugar into your blood, into your liver, and into your muscle fibers. And we use that for quick energy. Back in the day, let's go back to the Paleolithic era, we used that to get out of the way of, say, a saber-toothed tiger or something like that. But since the saber-toothed tiger is now extinct, we don't have to have all of that quick energy. As a matter of fact, what happens is, after we cap off all of the sugar that we need in our muscles, liver, and blood, we have to do something else with it. So our body will convert it into a long-chain triglyceride and store it as a fat. It drives it into your fat cells and you get fatter. But wait, there's more. It's not the only hormone that comes into effect. There are two other hormones, ghrelin and leptin. Ghrelin is the hormone that's supposed to make you feel hunger pangs. You ever go, "Oh, I'm starving," all of a sudden your stomach feels cavernous and hungry. That's ghrelin telling your brain, "Hey, it's time to feed me." And leptin is the hormone that's supposed to make you feel full. The problem there is if you keep releasing it and you become resistant to leptin, you never feel full. If we keep releasing ghrelin and leptin, we're going to keep thinking that we're hungry and we can never get full. So that tells us we need more to eat. And if we eat more sugar, the whole vicious cycle starts over again and over and over. And it becomes like a drug. I've often compared it to cocaine. If you never do cocaine, you don't know what it feels like. So you don't miss it. But once people start doing cocaine, they want more and more and more. You're chasing that high The same thing happens with sugar. If you just abstain from it, you'll be fine. But once you have some, you're going to want more and more and more. And how do I know this? Well, I'm a sugar addict. I've been knowing that about myself for a long time. And the best way to arrest a problem is not to let the problem start to begin with. Come on, sugar's as bad as an illegal drug? Well, kind of, but here's the difference. We don't give the illegal drugs to kids at birthday parties and tell them it's okay. You see, we start this problem early and then it just continues through life. So between 1865 and 1978, there was a rise in sugar consumption. But right around 1980, we saw that hockey stick just go straight up, and it's never stopped. So why did that happen? What happened between 1978 and 1980? Well, a couple of things. For one, we had the McGovern Committee that met for 10 years trying to decide which was better, carbohydrates or meat. The conclusion that the McGovern Committee came to was that eating carbohydrates was much healthier than eating saturated fats, meat, and what have you. So at that point, we decided to come up with a graph known as the food pyramid. And in the food pyramid, the entire bottom showed 11 servings of fruit, vegetable, grains, and sugars, right? So every food company came in and decided, hey, this is great for us. We can just sell the cheaper stuff and list it as being something that's healthy. So in the 1980s, we started the whole campaign of if you didn't eat fat, you couldn't get fat. And guess what? Sugar and carbohydrates have zero fat in them, so eat all you want. As a matter of fact, we saw a lot of things happening during that time. Triathlons became a thing. Marathons got bigger and bigger. And if you read any magazine pertaining to anything to do with a marathon or a triathlon, they told you the more sugar you ate, the better, because that was the energy source you needed. As a matter of fact, one of my favorite things was carbo loading. I never heard that in the 1970s, but in the 1980s, everyone was carbo loading. Right before a race, you were going to have a pasta feed and eat all the cake and pie and ice cream you wanted the night before, because somehow magically your cells were going to take in more carbohydrates. By the way, folks, this is all BS. More carbohydrates, and you were going to be able to run faster and longer and better, and so on. As a matter of fact, during the race, people started eating stuff like power bars and goo chops and all of these high fructose corn syrup products that purported to make you a better athlete while you were running. Gatorade became a big deal. At that time, I was coming out of college with a degree in exercise physiology and nutrition, and I noticed one thing. The people I was working with to run marathons and triathlons were actually gaining weight through training. That's when I started my theory that exercise was a poor way to lose weight. You couldn't outrun a bad diet. You couldn't outrun these sugars and grains. Now, people weren't as obese as they are now, but we were getting there. At the same time, I was a strength and conditioning coach in a high school, and I noticed kids in 1985 having much more weight on them than they did when I graduated high school in 1981. That was only a 4.5-year period, and I was already seeing the effects of sugar. 1984 was the first year that I was invited to Aspen, Colorado to go work with the rich and famous people and get them in shape for their summer vacation. Two things were going on in Aspen that summer. One, everybody was reading a book by a guy named Robert Haas called Eat to Win. I read the book and literally thought that it was a parody. I didn't think it was a real book. I thought it was something that was put up by Mad Magazine, and I'm not kidding. The book said to cut out all protein and all fat and simply eat carbohydrates because, again, if you didn't eat fat, you couldn't get fat. The other thing that happened in Aspen that summer was everyone started eating gobs and gobs of pasta. There was a place called Mezzaluna. Yes, the same Mezzaluna where O.J. Simpson's wife had her last meal in L.A. There was a version of that in Aspen, and folks were going there just to carbo load on pasta the night before I took them out for long 13,000 and 14,000 foot hikes. Was I holier than thou back in those days? Absolutely not. Did I try it? Yes, I did. I noticed back then when I ate pasta, I was much better on the first hour of a hike the next morning. But then I found myself ravenous and hungry. And the other thing I noticed for the first time in my life was that at the end of a long hike, I would get a lot of swelling in my ankles. Remember, I was in my early 20s. Why would I be getting this swelling? So I started asking doctors about the swelling in my ankles, and they said, well, you spent time at altitude. That wasn't an answer to me. What would altitude have to do with swelling in my ankles? What I learned later was all of the extra sugar that was coming in the form of complex carbohydrates from all the pasta I was eating the night before was actually causing the problem. And while I'm on the subject of complex carbohydrates versus simple carbohydrates, there is no difference. Well, that's not exactly true. There's a bit of a difference. And again, I'm going to use my pen to show the difference. So remember I talked about the sugar spike? Whenever you're having a simple sugar, it spikes up really fast, but it comes down really fast because the insulin goes right over the saccharide and pushes it down right away. When you have a complex carbohydrate, you get the spike and you keep releasing insulin on it, but it doesn't go down because the complex carb releases from your stomach at a more normal rate. Because the complex carb is released more slowly, your body has to keep releasing insulin, right? We call this a glycogen load. With simple sugar, it's a spike and it goes down because the insulin pushes it down. With the complex carb, it goes up, it stays up for hours, and you have to keep releasing insulin, making you more insulin resistant than you would be just from sugar. So whenever you think that a complex carbohydrate is good, and by the way, doctors will push this, the registered dietitians will push this and tell you complex carbs are the good carbs, they're long, slow-burning carbs. There is no difference to your liver. Once it hits your liver, it's all sugar. It's just that one gets tackled pretty quickly and the other one can last for hours. So I can actually make an argument that complex carbs are worse for your system than simple carbs. So how does industry play into this? Well, several ways. Remember we mentioned the triathlons and marathons early on? Walk into any running store or bicycle shop today, and I call it the wall of sugar. Every sports drink, every goo, every type of bar you could possibly want is on that wall. And what do they all have in common? Sugar, and lots of it. They're telling you that this is actually good for your health. But it doesn't stop there. You see, we don't just put table sugar on everything. It's always in the food. Take cereal, for instance. John Kellogg came up with dextrinization in the early 1900s. That was taking a carbohydrate and cooking it down enough until that carbohydrate just became a simple sugar. Dextrose is one of those products that they put on cereals. And what do they tell you to eat every morning? Breakfast cereals. Breakfast cereals that people are feeding their kids every day. And it's not just their kids, they're eating it too. We see it in municipalities. We see it in school lunch and school breakfast. It's everywhere. Most of these meals contain hardly any protein or fat. It's all sugar-based. As a matter of fact, most of these schools will not just sell regular milk, they will have chocolate milk and strawberry milk, which is full of sugar. And on campus, they have vending machines that are full of sugar in the form of fruit juice. Again, not good for you. Same as a soft drink. Sugar is everywhere. And even if your kid is playing an afternoon sport, there's a parent that's always in charge of bringing something. They'll bring donuts, they'll bring muffins, they'll bring cupcakes. And some of these cupcakes will have an inch of icing on top. That's a new phenomenon. There's no way a kid needs to eat anything right after a practice. They can wait until they get home. But this is something we're doing, and it's not a good direction. None of us need sugar all day, every day. The less sugar you get, the better. So now, I want to talk about what the food manufacturers do to convince you that what they're selling is actually good for you. The manufacturers will use anything to convince you that their product is healthy. They will use any term that's trendy at the time. They'll put the heart healthy sign on it. They'll tell you that it's low in cholesterol. They'll say it's vegan. They'll say it's keto. They'll say it's low fat. They'll say no sugar added. All of these are just throw words that they put out there to convince you that they have a healthy product. It's up to you to advocate for yourself. You have to read packages, and not just any part of the package, because the front of the package, they can lie all they want. As a matter of fact, on the back of the package, where you see nutrition facts, there's usually nothing factual about the nutrition in nutrition facts. The one place where the FDA make companies tell the absolute truth is under ingredients. And just know this, under ingredients, they have to list it in order of the amount in the product. So whatever is the largest percentage in the product goes first, second, third, and so on. So that's where the truth in labeling is. Nowhere else on the package will a company have to do this. And now the list I promised at the beginning. I have 51 names on this list. Since this list came out, there are a lot more, so you have to really study this. And I didn't even include the fake sugars. Here goes. Agave, Barbados sugar, barley malt syrup, beet sugar, brown rice syrup, butter syrup, cane juice crystals, cane sugar, caramel, carob syrup, castor sugar, coconut palm sugar, coconut nectar, confectioner sugar, corn sweetener, corn syrup solids, crystalline, fructose, dates, date sugar, dehydrated cane juice, demerara sugar, dextrose, evaporated cane juice, free-flowing brown sugar, fructose, fruit juice concentrate, fruit juice sweetened, galactose, glucose solids, golden sugar, golden syrup, grape sugar, high fructose corn syrup, honey, icing sugar, invert sugar, lactose, malt syrup, maltodextrin, maltitol, maltose, mannose, maple syrup, molasses, muscovado sugar, palm sugar, panocha, powdered sugar, raw sugar, refiner's syrup, rice syrup, saccharose, sorghum syrup, sucrose, sugar granulated, sweet sorghum syrup, treacle, turbinado sugar, yellow sugar, xylose. These names are purposely meant to be deceptive. They're nothing more than simple sugar. Your liver is a meritocracy. It sees all sugar exactly the same. Hey, if you guys get what's going on with sugar, and it is crazy, it's not the only thing. Another common mistake people are making are grains. Go watch my video, what eating grains is actually doing to your body.